Okay, we've got a lot to talk about. I want to tell you some things about the persuasive speeches and some other things that are going on in your life with respect to grades in the class. Number one, let's do the discussion boards first. A fair number of you are not reading the total instructions on the discussion boards. As a result, you're not getting full credit for your responses because, number one, a lot of times you're failing to notice that it says respond to someone else's post, and thus not doing that, that'll cost you points. The other thing is that you cannot reduce a discussion board to a 1 or 2 sentence response and expect to get any kind of full credit for any kind of a thoughtful response to whatever the question is that's being asked. Now, the other thing is that you should have a fairly good idea of what your course grade is so far. All of the grades have been posted, and you should be able to see where you stand. We have precious little time left. All of the quizzes have been reopened. If you did not take one of the quizzes, you still have an opportunity to do so. But please do not wait to do that. Get in there and take those quizzes that you may have missed and get that taken care of. All right, let's talk a couple of things. Number one, audience. It's kind of interesting how many of you, when you speak, make an assumption that your audience is you in terms of a mirror. So let me just say a couple of things. Number one, when you're giving a speech that is based on persuasion, and part of your persuasion has to do with moral values or Judeo-Christian beliefs, those kinds of things, do not assume that everyone in your audience is of your belief. That's number one. Number two, therefore, do not assume that when you are talking about a particular topic and you say in Christianity, this is the way it should be and this is the way it is and thus, when in fact a fair part of your audience could be Jewish, Muslim, atheists, agnostics, any number of other things. So, when you must make a statement like that, you couch the statement in the Christian belief, many say that. You do not say that you have to follow this particular thing because that's the Christian way. Not everyone in your audience may be Christian, and you can follow that there were a lot of other things that you could get into trouble when you make that kind of a far-reaching statement. Let's start with Cupcake, and Cupcake talked about doctor-assisted suicide. Slow down. Your speed is messing up your articulation. And your visuals that you used, I can't read the visuals, and I can't tell what it is you're trying to show me on the visual. You had a cuckoo clock go off while you were speaking. It's distracting, and it came at an important point in your speech. Again, these are the kinds of things that wouldn't happen in a classroom, but they are things that you need to be aware of in your home. You don't confirm counter-arguments. For instance, you do not, as we just said, talk about Christian values or morality, and you had a very passionate closing. Your audio varies a lot in your speech. Overall, you have to remember when you are talking to your audience and you adapt your speech to your audience that your audience may not have all of the same beliefs that you have. All right, let's talk to Love. Love talked about hugging, and particularly in schools, and the teachers aren't supposed to do that. Good lighting, great personal appearance, way to do it. You didn't have any visuals, which are a requirement for this speech. You are reading your speech. There was no expression or eye contact because you were reading the speech. There's a loud TV in the background that I can hear throughout your speech, and your speech is far too short. Also, don't get lost in your own speech. When you're reading, you want to make sure that you're familiar enough with it that you don't get lost in what it is you're saying. You didn't have enough sources, and your sources were not included in your speech. Make sure that you think in terms of that. So the length, the lack of visuals, and some of the other things that I said are really hurting you in speeches. All right, we have Schlinkler. She talked about abortion. You had a very appropriate appearance and tone for this speech. That's really crucial in this kind of speech. You had an excellent flow and a very passionate approach to what you were doing, and a very good presentation of the facts. Watch the tisk when you talk. This was a great speech, very well presented, tasteful presentation, and an excellent close. And by tasteful presentation, oftentimes in abortions, people want to show the grossest pictures that they can find. You did not do that, and I congratulate you for your choices in how you went about putting your speech together. Let's do Bandit. Bandit talked about cell phones among children. Watch your clipping of endings. You talked about radiating instead of radiation, or radiating. You didn't follow convention for showing the audience. I can't tell what the audience is, whether they meet the requirements, etc. Your reading causes poor eye contact. And then one of the questions that you raise is why ban cell phones only in schools? But then, too, how much do you know about what the rules are for cell phones in schools? It's one thing to say that this is what should be, but how well are you versed on what the situation really is in schools? And what about the other side, those who would disagree with your statement? Oftentimes in a persuasive speech, you need to acknowledge the other side of the story. You talked about a man and his attorney died of a brain tumor, but you didn't tie that in, that it was because of cell phones or cell phone use, even though you were talking about cell phones. So you want to be very specific when you make a tie-in. We're going to take a break here, and we'll come back in part 2.